All right, we continue with, it's going to be a very shortened lecture on organization. We continue from last time. Next topic is span of control. So the last one we covered was authority and power and some sources of power. Let's do sources of power. One type of power is called coercive power, meaning you make them fear, all right? Another one is reward power. Reward power is, let's say the camera guy is giving a few extra points, meaning one extra point for each video. So he's already recorded 6 or 7 videos. This means he's going to get a significant increase, maybe half a grade. By the end of the course, maybe he can get a full grade increase just because he's doing a little extra work. This is the reward for making him do extra work. The principle that we use in universities is called extra credit for extra work, okay? So I got the power in my particular case to give this guy an extra reward. But coercive power means that if you don't perform on the quiz well, you get F or almost F, okay? So this is known as, in English, is known as the stick. Stick is a big stick which you beat someone. So this is the punishment. And this is the reward is known as the carrot. You give something that they want, all right? The third type is called legitimate power. And it's simply based on one's position in the formal hierarchy. And legitimate power, the highest is at the biggest boss. So the higher up you are, the more legitimate power you have. You also have expert power. Expert power basically means you know what you're doing and they don't know what you're doing. And they need you. They have to have you, okay? So they usually, expert power means that, yeah, I can go to work 20 minutes late, but they need me in there, okay? They are dependent on my knowledge. They're dependent on my skills. So that's usually when you're a low-level worker, that's the basis of power. You gotta be a very good expert. For you, if you start, let's say, at the reception, working a job at the reception doesn't give you much of an expert power. Now, it may give you expert power if you know already Chinese and Japanese and English, and then they say, oh, we need her because she can handle so many different customers in so many different languages. Same thing, expert power. If you're a cook, not much of a power. But if you can cook Chinese and Japanese and Thai and whatever other type of food, maybe Russian food, suddenly you become an extremely valuable cook. This gives you, this is based on your expertise of being able to cook. So the idea is that your position may be extremely low, but if you know something or things way better than the others, you suddenly can have a significant power in the business. And the last one is called referent power. Referent power is basically when you have somebody or you're very close to someone in power. For example, your father is the owner of the business. Well, as the son, you're going to be relatively powerful. Or your uncle is in the business. Or maybe your brother, or maybe your sister, okay? So, it is, identification is more like association with a person who has desirable resources or traits, or with a person who has power, okay? So, maybe you're the son of the minister, okay? If you're the son of the minister, then you have some, some power. So these are the fundamental sources of power. So if you're very low, you better keep either expert power or you better have a big uncle or big brother, okay? You gotta have some relative. The next fundamental topic in organizational behavior, in organizational structure is span of control. And span of control is very simple. The number of employees. If you have a boss, how many employees you have? You have 2 employees, or 3, or 5, or 10. So, when you have number of employees, and here's the next key, that the manager can efficiently and effectively supervise. Yeah, you can have 20 employees, okay? But you're not going to be effective. You're not going to be able to be very effective. This is the same thing for the classroom. It is well known that a teacher has a good span when you have 20 to 25 students. For advanced MBA classes, the optimal size is considered to be 10 to 15. So, when a professor has only 10 students in class, he knows every single student. He knows who does what, how they think, how they analyze what they do, okay? And he can work personally with everybody. On the other hand, if we've got 30 students, he can't even learn the names. Now I got 55 students, I cannot even begin to learn the name of everybody. I just know a few faces of those that come commonly here. Or I can know someone who has a very special name or a very different name, okay? Or if someone has a different race, okay? So if we have 50 students, but only one is a black student, I can remember it. So that's part of span of control. Usually, not always, but usually an optimal span of control is considered between 5 and 10 people. Some authors like to think that it's between 4 and 8 people. So if you're going to be managing optimally, you need 5, 6, 7, maybe 8 people, and that's optimal. If you have 12, it's a little bit too much. It's a little bit too difficult. Okay, now, is it possible? And the answer is yes, it depends. So I was explaining last time what is a contingency variable. Contingency variable is essentially what it depends on. So, it depends on employees' training. If the employees are better trained, if they have more experience, you can have a wider span of control. So, if the employees are not good, they're not experienced, they don't know what they do, probably you're going to have only 3 people managing. But if everyone is very well trained, they are very well experienced, there is no problem to manage 10 people. So, a department chair will have 10, 12, or 15 professors. No problem to manage 15 professors. They're very experienced, they know what they're doing, everything's fine, okay? But if you got brand new people, you will need maybe 2, maybe 3. So, one way we call it widen the span. To widen the span means to increase the number of employees is by increasing their training, increasing their experience. Another way is to keep the work similar. If everybody has the same work or very similar work, you can increase the span a little bit. The reason is employees can help each other. So if they all do the same thing, A can help B, B can help C, they can self-manage to a certain extent. But if the work is very, very different, then it's a little bit harder to manage 20 people with very, very different work. That's the reason that we have now, let's say here, 50 students. The work here is the same. And for the same work of all 50 students, it's a little easier to manage 50 students because you're all supposed to do the same thing. And tell the classmate, get rid of that toy. Yeah. No, just get rid of it. Put it on the next chair. Right. Keep playing with those toys non-stop. It's not kindergarten, it's called university, right? Okay, so the more complex the job, the narrower the span. Okay, if it's a simple job, then you can have a relatively wide span. All right, so now let's get back to the quiz that you just finished. When I give you on the, oh, computer will shut down. Cancel, cancel, cancel. A crisis, right, was averted. Okay, no more crisis. We got 15 more minutes to finish today. So, let's get back to the quiz which you just finished. When I give you what is span of control, if you just give me, oh, the number of employees managers can effectively supervise, that's good for F. Okay? We said this that a, maybe 8 or 9-year-old girl can learn, remember, and write that. What we need to do is explain that span of control is the number of employees. And then you need to tell me, it depends on the number of, on the employee training and experience. If they have a higher training and experience, the manager can manage more employees. Or, same thing, if the tasks are very similar, the manager can have more employees. So, you need to provide more explanations on the midterm, right? Same thing, the location of employees. If the employees are on very many locations, they're difficult to manage. You can manage very few. But if all of them are in the same room, it's a lot easier. So if they're in 10 different rooms, it's more difficult to manage. But if they're all in the same office, you actually sit in the same office. Maybe you sit in the corner of the office. The big boss always sits near the window. All right? And puts the new guy next to the wall, okay? Or something that's not desirable. So, if they're all in the same room, it's a lot easier to manage 10 people in the same room than maybe 5 people in 5 different rooms. So, location is also important. That's why, when you have a certain department, you all throw them in the same room. For example, if you go to your, let's say, I think in main building, the accounting department, you're going to see like 20 or 30 different accountants all in the same big office. So it's possible that for 20 people you're going to have only one boss, because the boss is in the room, he's seeing everything. Maybe the boss is not doing any work. The only work the boss is doing is watching the other 20 people and helping them if they have a problem. Next one is use of standardized procedures. If everything is standardized, it's easy to manage 10 or 20 people. But if things are not standardized, it's difficult to manage 15 people. It's almost impossible. So, the more standardized the work, the more people you can manage. The less standardized work, less people you can manage. And last one is sophistication of management information system. Usually, big corporations have an information system. You also have, let's say, the LMS. If you got the LMS and the LMS is relatively sophisticated, I can provide materials and all the other things. It's possible to manage more people in class. Okay? On the other hand, if you don't have a good information system, you cannot manage as many people. Example that I give you is when I was working in the sales department and you get almost 200 salespeople, the vice president of sales, who's the boss of everyone, wanted guys like me to create an information system where he can actually see all 200, what they're doing, all of their sales, their weekly sales, their monthly sales, and he's just looking at the numbers, okay? And then he looks between the different sub-departments, then between the different regions, and he can call any regional manager and say, hey, I'm seeing your number is too low. Tell me what's going on. What's the problem? So he just looks if everything's okay, and if something doesn't look okay, he makes a call and say, hey, this doesn't look right. Tell me what's going on, okay? For example, my boss will say, hey, I'm seeing you're supposed to have 50 students, but in class there are usually 20. What's the problem? And usually the answer is, well, there's no real problem. We are recording it on video, and some students may choose to watch it on video, hopefully, right? So, video is an extra information system that can reduce the number of students in class, or the opposite. We increase the number of students, but those present in class during lecture can be lower, okay? So, all of these are different, we call them contingency variables, or factors which affect the number of employees that can be, again, the key words of all, efficiently and effectively supervising. So that's span of control. The next is centralization. Some organizations are highly centralized. And when they're highly centralized, centralized means decision making is made at the top level, or decision making is making at higher level. So it says decision making takes place at upper levels of the organization. And decentralization means that it's usually taken at the lower level. So lower level managers provide input, or oftentimes they actually make the decision themselves, okay? So here you have a certain level of high centralization at the university. Big boss decides a lot of things. But here at the low level, they provide us with a lot of decentralization. So in this particular case, I'm at the very, very low level. I decide how many chapters to cover. I also decide how many quizzes to have. So I decide a lot of the little things that we're supposed to do in here. So I don't have too much supervision from my boss, and I don't need too much supervision from my boss, okay? And again, I don't need it because I'm highly skilled and highly experienced, and I know what I'm doing, okay? When they're low level, they need more supervision. So, some businesses are very, very, very centralized, others are relatively decentralized. The key word is flexibility. If a business is to be more flexible, you want more decentralization. If the opposite of flexible is called rigid, if you want a rigid structure, it's more centralization. And I think it's coming a little later. If you want an organization to be very efficient and to control costs, everything is highly centralized. On the other hand, if effectiveness is more important, if getting the job done is more important, you focus more on decentralization. So it also depends on your strategy. All right? So, formalization. Yeah, they don't have anything. Formalization means how much things are formal. Formal means written rules and procedures that employees must follow. Okay? Some organizations have big, it's called rule book. And there is a rule book. Everything is, we say, formalized. Examples will be banks. A bank is highly formalized. It has description of every job. It's got a description of every operation. It has a description of every transaction. There is a rule for every little thing. So a bank is highly formalized. Some universities at some level are very formalized, at another level they are relatively informal. Example of formalization is when I was teaching in Macau. When I was teaching in Macau, they require, it's a rule, they require that we have attendance. So we gotta call every student's name and check the mark to see their attendance. It's a requirement. Here, my understanding is that it's not required. Moreover, we have to have the attendance at the end of the week. And there is a simple computer system which simply checks if we put attendance or don't put attendance. If we don't put attendance by Friday night, on Monday or Tuesday they're going to call and say, hey, we don't have your attendance. What's going on? Maybe I was sick. Maybe I did not go to class, okay? Or maybe I forgot. So they're immediately going to call you and check, hey, what happened, okay? Same thing of formalization, they have simple rule. Grades must be submitted, let's say, if it's a final exam, within 7 days, okay? Something like that. So formalization tells you what's the rule, what's the procedure, what you have to go through, okay? Formalization may mean, in this particular case, which are the steps that I need to go through to order a textbook in accounting, okay? And they say, oh, you have to write a written request. And when you write a written request, you got to send it to your manager. Your manager will have to approve the written request and send it to the purchasing department, okay? The purchasing department, so turns out that ordering a textbook is fairly formalized. This means there's a particular rule and particular procedure. Procedure is almost the same as process. And procedure means the steps you have go through to accomplish something. So they say, you first, step number one, write to your manager. Step number two, manager approves. Step number three, manager sends to purchasing department. Step number four, purchasing department contacts seller or supplier and they send to accounting, okay? Accounting puts it in the books, and when the shipment is received, purchasing manager will have to notify accounting so that accounting makes a payment, okay? So a procedure is the number of steps you have to go through to accomplish something. This is what we're trying to learn in accounting. In accounting, you're taking a management course. Number one is you analyze the transaction. Number two, you record it in the journal. We call it journalize. Number three, you go to the next step, is you post the record. So you have step one, step two, step three, step 4, 5, 6, 7. Now that's a procedure. Formalization is writing rules, what you have to do, writing requirements, and writing procedures. Okay? So that's formalization. And Okay, the contingency factors that favor either mechanistic or organic model. I'll probably just explain those and finish with those today. So, you got a mechanistic model and organic model of organizational design. Let's explain those and we finish today. Everyone, please, 5 more minutes so I can finish for today. The mechanistic is a company which is rigid, hierarchical. You got a strict hierarchy. If you want to do something, you got to go to your boss. He will decide if he's going to someone else or go to his boss. So, you have a very strict, rigid structure. It is also hierarchy. Let's explain. Hierarchy means a structure in the form of a pyramid. You go to your boss will go on the side or go up, okay? So hierarchy is a pyramid structure. Rigid means it's not very flexible. Number 2, fixed duties. You're doing only this, nothing else. You're doing only this, nothing else. What I see here, let's say in the administration of the university, is that they say, oh, you want to order the book, you got to contact that person. Nobody else can do that, okay? You want to do this, oh, you got to contact that person. Nobody else. So, you have fixed duties. And you can, only that person is responsible for it, only that person can do it for you. Nobody else, okay? You want to buy a textbook, you get a textbook, you got to pay to that person. Well, that person's not here, well, you wait, come back tomorrow, or come back after lunch, okay? You don't have anyone else doing the work. So, fixed duties, okay? Now, let's get at the same time the organic. In an organic, it's not necessarily hierarchical. It could be collaboration. I can call someone from accounting and say, hey, can you help me with this thing? And the guy in accounting say, yeah, sure. Oftentimes when I was in the sales department, because I'm using the information system, I call the IT department. I call the IT department and say, hey man, I got this problem with the database. Can you tell me what's the table, or what is this, or can you give me the login and the password to that particular database, or I got this particular problem. So usually in an organic environment, you can call different people from different departments. They're going to be cooperative. The cooperation is called here in this one collaboration. To collaborate means to work together, okay? Now, if it is a mechanistic, it's going to work as follows. If I need something from the accounting department or the IT department, I have to ask my boss. My boss will call the accounting department, and the boss in the accounting department, and the boss in the accounting department is going to give it to someone in there. So I say, hey boss, I need from the accounting department certain information. He says, okay, wait, send me a request. I got to write and send him a request. So it is also formalized. I got to write him a request. My boss is going to send my request to the accounting boss. And the accounting boss will decide who's going to be, he's going to say, John's going to do the job. He says, John, can you take care of this? And he's going to reply to my boss saying, John is responsible for your request. And my boss is going to send me a message back and say, John will take care of your problem. And then I have to contact John and say, hey John, I need this thing, and your boss has assigned you to do the job. So you go through a lot of unnecessary steps. In an organic environment, usually the way the job gets done is I say, hey John, how about a lunch? You want to go for a lunch? And John says, yeah, sure, we go for a lunch. So we go for a lunch, we discuss a whole bunch of other things, about the economy and everything else. And at the end of the lunch, say, hey John, I have this little thing about the database or whatever is in the accounting. How is it done? He says, oh, don't worry. I mean, we've already eaten for 20 or 30 minutes. He says, don't worry, I'm going to get it done for you. I'm going to send it to you in 10 minutes, okay? So this is a completely different approach. When I was working in a modern technology software company, we were highly organic. I just call John and tell him what I need and it gets done. In a mechanistic, there are many rules. Everything is about rules. In an organic, few rules. When I was working there, we had very few rules, okay? I did not have to write any reports. We just had one meeting for 1 hour, and I tell my boss what I'm doing. Next thing is I told you was formalized communication channel. A formalized communication channel is you go through the pyramid. I call my boss calls, which is, he calls the accounting boss calls his employee. Sometimes I cannot contact his employee. Sometimes his employee is going to reply back to his boss is going to send the communication back to my boss, and I'm going to get it back. So that's formalized communication. Informal communication is, I gave you the example. John, you want to go for lunch today? And he says, yeah, okay, let's go for lunch. I'm going to eat. In my case, when I was working with IT, my good friend was Rick, okay? And Rick just bought a house and this and that. Say, hey, Rick, I want to go for lunch, and that's how we do it. In a next characteristic, in a mechanistic organization, everything is centralized, everything is coming from the top to the bottom. Over here, things are decentralized. Not only my manager, a lot of times I will decide what to do, I'll decide how to do. I have 6 or 7 projects. I will decide this project is more important, this project is less important. So this thing of more important and less important is called prioritizing. Prioritizing is deciding what is more important in order to work on it. Sometimes, if I have difficulties prioritizing because I know, oh, this is very important, and this is important, and this is important, I say, hey boss, I got 7 projects, and 3 of them are very important. Which should I work on first? And he's just saying, oh yeah, work on this one. This is the most important, okay? Get this done first, and then you work on the other 2. All right? So, in an organic, usually decisions are made at the low level. Usually prioritizations are made at the low level. Goals are made at the low level. So here, everything is at the low level. Now, we can get back to summarize, and let me finish with mechanistic are very tall. Good friend of mine, he was a professor for a while, so he had almost 35 years of experience. For 20 years he was a professor. For 15 years he worked at a major company, military type company. It's called Raytheon. They do weapons. And he said, oh, we are very mechanistic. Lots of rules, lots of regulations. And he said, we have 11 levels of structure. You got boss, mini boss, bigger boss, the bigger boss, the bigger boss. You got all 11 levels of structure. Now, in our case, we were 2,000 people, and 2,000 people were distributed in literally 4 levels. Only 4 levels. So organic are very, we call it flat. Flat means very few levels. So tall is like this and flat is like this. The example of highly mechanistic is governments and government bureaucracy. There's the central government, then there is the, let's say, the provincial government, then there's the city government, and then within the city government, you got more and more and more. Governments can easily have 8, 10, 12 levels, okay? So they are highly mechanistic. Another highly mechanistic institution is the army. In the army, you got huge levels. Lots of fixed duties. You do this, you do this, you do that. Okay. You got many rules. You got big rule books. Yeah, everything's formalized. You can't just talk to it. You gotta talk only to your boss, or they call them superior. Everything's highly centralized. Everything's coming from top orders, okay? You got very, very tall. You got a boss of a boss of a boss of a boss, okay? You got, so, and modern technology companies, anything that's associated with innovation, with technology, they are very organic in nature. All right? So, when I'm asking you to compare on the exam, you gotta give me a little bit more than just one sentence, all right? One sentence, that's what we teach, kids in kindergarten, right? Here, you need to provide what's called an explanation. Good enough for today? Happy? Okay.